A dog stands in a box. On one side, a low wall, barely knee-high. On the other side, the floor is wired to deliver a shock. The dog only has to do one thing to make the pain stop: step over the wall. It's a small step. The wall is nothing, and the dog doesn't take it. The shock comes, and the dog lies down. It whimpers. It waits for it to be over. The way out is open the entire time, a single step away, and the animal has decided, somewhere underneath thought, that there's no point in trying. This isn't really a story about a dog. It's about the most important thing that can happen to a mind, and it happened to that dog about an hour earlier in a different room. In 1967, two researchers at the University of Pennsylvania, Martin Seligman and Steven Maier, were running a fairly ordinary experiment on dogs and shocks, and they kept hitting a glitch. Some of the dogs wouldn't cooperate with the part where they were supposed to learn to escape. They just gave up, sat there and took it. Most scientists would have called those animals defective and thrown out the data. Seligman and Maier did the opposite. They asked why, and the answer rewrote how we understand giving up. Here's what they built. They split the dogs into groups. The first group got shocks they could stop, something they could do to end it. They had control. The second group got the exact same shocks for the exact same length of time, but nothing they did made any difference. The shock ended when the first group ended it, not when they acted. Identical pain. The only thing that separated the two groups was a single variable: control or no control. Then came the real test. Every dog was put into that box with the low wall, where escape was easy and obvious. Just step over. The dogs from the first group, the ones who'd had control, figured it out in seconds. They felt the shock, scrambled, found the wall, jumped, and the pain stopped. They learned fast. The dogs from the second group, the ones whose actions hadn't mattered, mostly didn't even try. They lay down on the floor and endured it. Escape was a single step away, and they never took it. They had learned something in that first room and carried it into the second, that what they did made no difference. So when the world changed, when the door actually opened, they couldn't see it. The earlier lesson had already closed it. Seligman called it learned helplessness. And the unsettling part is how easily it crosses over to us. Researchers ran the human version without the cruelty, using bursts of inescapable noise or stacks of puzzles that were secretly unsolvable. One group could turn the noise off or solve the puzzles. The other group, no matter what they did, couldn't. Then both groups got a new task that was completely solvable, with the off switch right there in front of them. The people who'd been through the uncontrollable version sat there and failed. They didn't flip the switch. In 15 minutes, they'd learned the same thing the dogs learned. Trying doesn't work, so why try? Sit with that. It takes a remarkably short time to teach a living thing that it's powerless. And once the lesson lands, it doesn't stay in the room where it was taught. It spreads. The person who couldn't fix one thing stops trying to fix anything. This is the shape underneath a lot of human suffering that looks, from the outside, like laziness or weakness or a baffling refusal to just leave. Seligman saw it almost immediately as a model for depression, the flattened certainty that nothing you do will change anything, so you stop doing. It shows up in dead-end jobs, in trapped relationships, in poverty that punishes effort, in any system where people learn, correctly at first, that their actions don't move the outcome, and then keep believing it long after the outcome becomes movable. For decades, that was the story. Animals and people learn to be helpless. It's in every textbook. But about 50 years after the original experiments, Seligman and Maier went back and said something extraordinary. We got it backwards. The neuroscience had caught up, and it told a different story. When a brain is hit with prolonged stress it can't control, it does not learn to shut down. Shutting down is the default. There's an ancient circuit deep in the brainstem that, faced with sustained pain, automatically produces passivity, fear, and withdrawal, the lying down and taking it. That response is built in. It fires on its own. Nothing has to teach it. So what is actually learned? The opposite. Control. When an animal discovers that its actions can change what happens to it, A region at the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that plans and reasons, switches on, reaches down, and physically silences that brainstem shutdown circuit. Detecting control is what's learned, and learning it is what releases the brake. The dogs that escaped easily weren't dogs that had failed to learn helplessness. They were dogs that had already learned they had power, and that knowledge reached down and switched the helplessness off before it could take hold, which flips the entire meaning of the experiment. Helplessness was never the thing you acquire. It's the factory setting, what's left when the part of you that detects control has gone quiet. Giving up isn't something the world teaches you. It's what you fall back to when nothing has taught you otherwise. And that, strangely, is the hopeful version. Because if helplessness is just the absence of a learned sense of control, then control can be put back. A brain that learned it was powerless can be taught again that its actions matter, and the same prefrontal circuit comes back online. The lever is not the size of the problem. It's whether you believe and then actually feel that what you do changes something. Even one small, real piece of control, one thing you can genuinely move, can begin switching the system back on. There's even an immunization effect. Animals that first experienced control, that learned early their actions worked, were far harder to break later. They'd installed the override before the stress arrived. The early experience of mattering protected them, which is a quiet, heavy thing to understand about a childhood, or about anyone you're raising, or about yourself. So go back to the dog in the box, lying on a floor it could step off of in a single second. It isn't weak. It isn't broken in any way it was born with. It's running the default, the response every nervous system falls into when it has lost the thread of its own power. The wall was always low. The way out was always open. What it lost wasn't the ability to jump. It was the belief that jumping would do anything. And the reason this should land on you is that you have your own boxes, things you've stopped trying at, not because they're truly locked, but because somewhere back there you learned they were, and you never tested the door again. Some of them really are locked, but some of them aren't anymore, and you can't tell which from the inside, lying down. The only way to find out is the one thing the helpless brain is built not to do. You get up. You try the wall. You check whether it still holds. Because the worst lie helplessness tells you isn't that you're trapped. It's that there's no longer any point in looking for the way out.